for demolishing it, and what could the costs possibly be just from their perspective. So I will start with, if it were a building that we kept, from the district's standpoint, we must follow the commercial construction codes under the Uniform Construction Code and International Uniform Construction Code. The building would be existing if we maintained it as educational space. Right now we don't have any need for educational space. We have our new building here. We don't have growing enrollment at this point in time. So we then asked, if we were not using it for educational space, what would change? And regardless of what the changes were, permits would be required for anything that we're going to do with the building if it were kept. I printed out copies of PA Code 403.42, which are permit requirements and exemptions. And anytime an owner or authorized agent who intends to construct, enlarge, alter, repair, move, demolish, or change the occupancy of a commercial building, structure, or facility, or to erect, install, enlarge, alter, repair, remove, convert, or replace any gas, electric, mechanical, or plumbing systems regulated by the Uniform Construction Code shall first apply to the building code official and obtain the required permits. So we would be required to have a permit to have that $33,000 that we talked about the last time that we were here in plumbing. That would require a permit. When you have to have a permit, from what I understand, and Dick, if you want to step in at any point, please help me out here. But when you have a permit, it also requires construction documentation. And that construction documentation must be created by an official who is recognized by the state as a licensed architect or licensed professional engineer. And they shall prepare the construction documents under the architect's licensure law, and it gives its statute number, or the engineer, land surveyor, or geologist registration law. Which means that if we were going to go ahead with the plumbing or the actual reporting on the floor joists, because it is structural, we would need to have the permit and we would have to have construction documents created. So we would need to be finding those professional individuals to create those construction documents, and those individuals would present it to zoning and to the borough. And that is still just for the educational purpose. If the board were to move into a purpose that is otherwise not educational, we also needed to understand what zoning were we in, and we are in residential township zoning, and what does that leave us in availability to actually have within that building. So I will read what is permitted use, accessory uses and structures, and then I did print every zoning code, so if anyone has a question about what does this particular thing mean, we can go through those types of codes. Again, bear with me, it's a large document and I've had a couple days to review it, but I don't quite know where everything is in here. But permitted use, accessory uses and structures, communication antenna equipment buildings, cultivation of crops, dwelling, yeah, we're not going to go there, I guess. Dwelling, I have a comment, but single family detached dwellings, two family dwellings, essential services. Dick and I thought essential services meant your EMTs, your fire stations, and things like that. It did not. It actually meant utility companies being able to use the facility. So essential to the lifestyle that we have is more how that one reads in my mind, because if we didn't have electricity or we didn't have a means to gas and all of the things that give us the comforts of what we live with, that is an essential service. Family-based group home, family daycare home, no impact home-based business, and that is it on the list. They also have conditional uses, which would be a bed and breakfast, a communication tower for governmental use, a daycare center, a multiple family dwelling, a townhouse dwelling, home occupation, public park, public or quasi-public uses, public service facility. That is where your fire stations and your government entities like a post office and things could be moved into the facility. Transitional professional offices, and there is one that is broad that says uses not provided for, but it doesn't give an explanation of what that means. So that's the list of items that you would need to use it for. If you are going to use it for something other than educational, you must bring it all up to code, which means that all of these different types of uses do have different international code. It is no longer just existing uniform code. It could mean that it is existing code until you have to do something that's new or repairing, and then you have to go back to the international building code and bring it back up to that standard. So that was very interesting to learn about that process. In understanding, no matter what we do, if the building is also demolished, you still have to have a permit for that as well. And you have to have, hold on one second. If the construction involves demolition, the site plan shall indicate construction that is to be demolished and the size and location of existing structures and construction that will remain on the site or plot. We will not need to do another land development plan. That has already been approved with 31 down because that was part of the initial approvals. So that is what we had learned by going out to speak to zoning. The zoning office, of course, was providing us with answers about parking, and that it would depend on what use 31 was regulated for as to whether they would zone as far as the parking would be okay or if additional parking would be necessary. They were also very concerned, as was I, that that building is attached to our building. So it's not like you could use it for private dwellings or bed and breakfast or anything else, but no matter what went into that building, if we did not provide solid wall structures where they were completely separate, they would be in our building basically with no clearances. So individuals with no clearances should not be anywhere near our students that way. So that is what we have found. There are monies available through the Department of Community and Economic Development for items that could be used for the building. The one that I thought was the most humorous was that the state of Pennsylvania has $60 million to give away under a grant under the DCED, which is Department of Community and Economic Development. $60 million to give away for building a theater, a film center, or anything that has to do with producing a television show or producing a television commercial. They have $60 million to assign for that. They're complaining about the $100 million that they give education every year, but $60 million is assigned for that. So, you know, I did have a chuckle to myself that who's in charge of the money if you have $60 million to do that? And they would provide funding for buildings to allow film industries to come in. They are very heavily, and I don't know why, Pennsylvania is very heavily interested in gaining film industries. So that one made no sense to me. But it was out there, and there are also all kinds of other grants, but they take time. It takes a lot of strategy to put together the grant applications. So that time, I'm not sure where the board would want us to go with trying to put together grant applications for the building. And you really have to know what it is that you would be using the building for in order to apply for those grants. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I have.
I'll just add one thing to what you had said in our conversation over there, that you know, it was a fact-finding conversation or session, but one of the things that came out of that was that anything we did do would have to meet present zoning. I mean, they couldn't make a commitment to whether they could change zoning or not, but it is zoned what it is zoned right now. As long as you're complying within that, if you as long as you comply with the requirements of that zoning area for whatever the conditional use or incidental use might be, it would basically have to okay. That's what I heard out of that meeting. But you have to comply. Okay?
There was another piece of information that came today, actually, that came into my office for. The original contract said that an electrical panel was to be placed in the district office. And then when the alternate contract, EC 16, GC 18, was created, that panel was moved out to 31. We feel that the panel now needs to be moved back to the district office because we're not sure of what's going to be happening there. It does require right now that we have temporary service installed to keep the district office operating. They've been coming through and testing where the power is coming in on which supply, and they're narrowing it down. By Thursday, they should have all of that ready for us, and a swap could take place onto a temporary power supply.
And that's correct. It's the original panel you were talking about will be the same panel, just be in a different location. But we're trying to avoid putting anything over into the 31 building. Actually, it'll be a little bit shorter than I think on the VO side of it anyway. Right. So I think that side of it's fine, or the NBF, whatever that is. And then temporary, it looks like we might be down to just one circuit, which would be very fortunate. So I think we have the cable and everything actually here already. So it looks like that can happen fairly easily.
Great.
And you're right, Thursday is what we were told.
So I'll open it up for board discussion.
Well, we've had no takers.
Can I ask, what happens if we did nothing? Table it, put no money into it?
But you still have to heat it in the winter. That's still gonna cost.
Unfortunately, there's no such thing as putting no money into it. There's no such thing.
Okay, but if we decided to demo it, we would have to pay for a permit and a new site plan. So we're still going to put money in.
You've already done the site plans, you would need the permit,
Just
and there would be a construction drawing, which I think has already been done in the original plan, is that
We would be able
correct?
to reuse a drawing, I think, that we have already for that.
So then
I
I
didn't ask that.
I would be asking if they would waive the fee, seeing as how there's already substantial fee that was paid. Well, I can't guarantee that, I'd have to pursue that.
So we're talking about leaving the building there, for what purpose, and for how long? So, year one, we pay so much to heat it, year two, year three,
No, I didn't mean
you know,
indefinitely. Okay, I'm just saying, okay, the building, it's a building. Any realtor, any person that owns real estate knows that a building is an asset. Please hear me out.
I am.
Okay, is an asset. Okay. If we tear it down and within 3 months, we find a purpose for that, it's gone. I'm just saying, can we table it, not putting a bunch of money into it? I know we've got our options. Once
but
it's
we
gone,
had
it's
16
gone.
plus months in looking for a purpose for it. And we have not come up with a purpose for it in basically 2 years.
A building's an asset if you have a use for it. And when you have no use for it, it becomes a liability, and it becomes an expense, and it becomes an ongoing expense. We've had, with this new board, and I don't need to call it new anymore, but 16 months to look for a use for this building. The fact that Mrs. Basin, and may I say that Mrs. Basin, who works probably 10 or 12 hours a day, along with Mr. Mrs. Smith, Brandy, with the budget, with running the school district. She certainly has my admiration. But to think that Mrs. Baseman last Friday is out at the borough office talking to zoning to find a use for it, I'm not even going to say anything else. I'm going to just shake my head. That's all I can do. I will say no more. But we have a building. This should be the easiest, most simple decision we ever had to make once we cut out the emotion. Any board in Pennsylvania, I honestly believe, would look at this decision, look at all the facts, and say, it's a no-brainer. Once you take out the emotion. I've been told that I'm cold, that I don't like that beautiful building. Let me tell you, I live right up the street. I walk my dogs by it all the time. Beautiful, beautiful building, stone front. But I can tell you, when you go through the front doors, the beauty's all over. And in simple words, it's a dump. Folks, it's a dump. We've had 3 engineering firms tell us it's a dump. It's not just my opinion. Okay? We've had 3 of them. 2 firms, pardon me, and a codes office who a year ago were going to lock the doors in 6 months if we didn't make emergency repairs. We have a report from C.S. Davidson done on early February, with about 70 photos. I don't know if you've all seen it. I don't know how anybody can look at this and say, oh yeah, I think that's worth saving. Oh yeah, I think we can fix that up. We have a building that serves no educational purpose, that everyone has known for at least 2 years would be available, attached to our new building, no parking during the day or any evenings when there's an event, an extremely, what I call an extremely limited use, available uses for it. Mrs. Wright's correct, the building is an asset, as long as you have a use for it. And when you don't have a use for it, then it becomes a liability. I gotta tell you, I asked several of my friends who are real estate investors. I told them about this building. And I said, what would you do? Would you put money into this? And if so, how much? One of them just laughed. One of them said, heck no. And the other one asked me if I was serious. And I said, yes, I am. None of them would. These are investors. You got to get by the emotional part. I know some people went to school there 40, 50 years ago, and they just don't want to let it go. But as a school board, our job isn't to look back 40 or 50 years. Our job is to look forward 40 or 50 years. And the kids coming up aren't going to care. And if that building's saved, someday we'll all be dead, and nobody's going to care. The board's vision is not to look back. The board's vision is to look forward. That's what I believe. In conclusion, I could not possibly commit, when we talk about a budget right now, well, we're right down to talking about shutting the freezers off in the cafeteria during the summer, telling teachers they can't have a microwave or a coffee pot in their room. When we're down to cutting everything that can be cut, to even consider putting $1 into a useless building with no educational purpose, and that's what we are. We're a school board. We're not a board for a construction company or a real estate investment firm. We're a school board, and we deal with education. And when we get something like this that absolutely serves no educational purpose, for me personally, once I cut the emotion, this is the easiest vote that I've made in 3.5 years on the board. Thank you.
Mr. President, first of all, being in this room is awesome. It's the first board meeting probably in 5.5, 6 years that we can hear everybody talk. It's the first time that we can see video. Turn out the lights, you can actually see the screens. This is awesome, and this is progress. and that school, that building is not progress. I would like to make a motion that we consider the 1931 to be demoed, go back to the original plan of site plan, and proceed with demolition of the 1931 structure.
Or you can, go ahead.
No, go ahead, ladies first.
Questions or comments? Mr. President, I'm sitting here with a piece of paper in front of me from the C.F. Davison Company that says, in our professional opinion, a 1931 building is a structure approaching the end of its serviceable life. That tells me, yeah, it can be repaired, but it's 8 years old. Why, I would rather stick the money into the valley, into McCall, into Leiter. I'd rather stick that money into other buildings, other properties. So this report's telling us that building is useless. I hate to see it go. I was here when Flight 800 opened the front doors to let people in. It has emotion to me too. But you know what? It's not serving our kids right now in education. We need to dump it and move on.
I'd like to say something. I don't know what the big rush is to tear it down. What is a big, why can't we winterize it for 1 year?
We have a
It's
budget.
money. It's not gonna cost anything.
Mrs. Johns, we have a budget that we need to approve, and it's not possible, Mrs. Johns, it's not possible to approve that budget if we don't know what we're going to be putting into this building. As I stated, I think that the amount put into the building should be 0. But we have to decide, before we can possibly approve a budget, we have to know what we're doing with this. As Mr. Snell had mentioned in our meeting last month, we were talking about the costs that would be incurred just to keep that building just this winter heated at 50 degrees, and that came up. It'd be nice to say, yes, let's sit on this a while, but we have been sitting on it for a while, and it's time to move. The decision has to be made. And I think, Mrs. Basin, has this C.S. Davidson report been, is this available to the public?
It's on our website.
It's
yes.
on the website?
Yes.
Has everybody seen this report? I mean, this gets you past my opinion, her opinion, his opinion. This will get you past it. This is something that you need to see. If you haven't looked on the website, you need to see this. You need to see the evaluation from a professional engineer, the third evaluation. And as Mr. Conklin said, it's just, the evaluation, the conclusion is it's nearing the end of its serviceable life. I don't know what else to say.
Can I ask a question, please? Okay, say we vote to demolish it. Okay. Could we wait? Nothing against you, nothing against any of the contractors here. But we are under a contract with them that every time we do anything, every time we blink, it costs us. Could we wait until the present contractors are cleared out and then bid for the demolition?
The problem with that is, Mrs. Wright, and that's, your suggestion is, I guess it's reasonable, but when the contractors are here and the wrecking ball is moving, and then when everybody goes away, when all the contractors leave and go home, and you call somebody back in here, if that doesn't at least double the cost to bring them back, I'll go out there and start eating bricks myself. I mean, there's just no, seriously, you can't. The deadline for that building should be, as that wrecking ball goes from north to south. If we don't have a use for it by the time it gets to the 31 section, in my opinion, they should just keep right on going. But as far as calling somebody back in here, the cost would be, I don't know, talk to any contractor and ask them, once they leave the job, if you call somebody else in or call them back, the cost will, if you think it'll be expensive now,
Would it now require a change order?
If I may just hop in here just for a brief second, we certainly can go ahead and ask what the cost would be to demo the building. And I believe that we would have an answer for you relatively quickly to do that. And if we had that answer within the time frame that we had construction crews still here, the board would have more information to do that, correct, Dick?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Snow, I'd like to make a comment too. This is a stone structure that today you find very few like. It would cost, and I'm not an engineer or anything, I would estimate millions of dollars to build something like that. A district like ours, or any district, could not afford to build a building with natural stone siding on it, because it's too expensive. We have the building now. Why don't we at least put it on hold for 1 year to figure out what, to give us a chance to check in on grants, and for usage of it. We couldn't do anything about it before because there were still students in there. You can't find somebody for the room when the room's being occupied. And then with Ms. Mason with being new and doing the budget and teachers' contracts and all that stuff, she really hasn't had that much time to really look into it. Now with some of that stuff settled, she may have the opportunity to start to really look for it.
may I go back?
But I think it ought to be put on hold for at least a year to give us a chance to see what we can really do with it, because once we get rid of it, we'll never get it back.
Once it's gone, it's gone. So you're talking about incurring paying the money to have the pipes put in, heat it.
You can be just like a lot of people has camps. They shut everything down, they shut water off, everything, they winterize it, they put antifreeze in the pipelines and all that stuff. For 1 year.
Mr. Snell, could we open this up for maybe public opinion? I mean,
We'll open it up for public comment when we get to public comment.
Are you voting?
but we're not gonna take a
We have a
vote.
motion on the table.
Okay, we have,
Have motion on the board.
but I think before we vote on that, could we put public comment?
Absolutely not.
Back
We have
in.
a motion on the table.
So in other words, the public won't get to express how they feel about it. I mean, they're the owners of the building.
Mr. Ruffin?
They won't get to express their, I'm sorry, I'm talking to Mr. Snell. So they won't get to express their thoughts, Mr. Snell, before we vote on it?
We have a motion on the table.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Mr. Ruffin, can I say something? The board, the room is definitely divided in the opinion. So if you got 10 people up here to say, yes, take it down, you'll get 10 people up here to say, no, leave it. So really opening it up to public opinion isn't going to solve anything. It is, it's a dilemma.
Can we ask questions?
It's
Not at this time.
And
Scott, withdraw your motion.
I know, it's emotional, I know, I want the money to go to the valley also.
Yeah, well then,
Mr. President, to withdraw the motion.
Now you don't have a motion on the floor.
Yep, is the motion
Motion
withdrawn?
withdrawn.
You know, Mr. Hagemeyer stated that, hold on to it for a year, and maybe we'll find a use for it. We haven't found a use for it in 2 years, and I don't think we're considering the cost of closing it.
I'll tell you, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to not put any money into the 1931 section, and if nothing is found until this date in 2018,
Better than that.
no money or any occupancy of it, then it will get demolished.
You got a whole land that's open, what's that cost? Build your damn home.
This time, we are recessing to executive session.
I'm an 8th grader and I know that this is senseless.
You're the public. You don't want to hear us.
Should I stop recording? That
I lost their recording.
huh?
I lost it.
Oh, you lost it.
Hey, Scott.
Does that mean to stop recording?
No. Well, keep it on for now.
Okay.
Somebody you might have a sunshine.
I'm an 8th grader. And how is this gonna... This sounds like a whole bunch of baloney to me. tired long enough to see that. Thank you. If you ever need a volunteer, I just retired after 33 years. I would come into your class for free. Because that is so nice. We can use them. I was teary-eyed through the night of the prom. I know. I was sitting next to a gentleman who was not going to love, and I didn't know him. Until I started speaking to him, and he was he was the one with the rhythm standing right next to you. Yes.
Oh, he's got rhythm.
I thought you were.
I know, he's got rhythm.
He has serious rhythm. Yeah. I'm sorry. Mrs. Snyder. Fine. But if you ever need congratulations to you. Can I tell you? Like, I can't believe you finally did it. Do I look younger? No. Yeah, I get along with you. I'm sorry. But it feels really, really good. And I'm very happy where I was. They asked me if I would come and do stuff, and I said, well, I can't. Which is a month ago. I'm like, I'm not trying to know whether I know. I worked in the cyber environment at the end, and in a life skills class, which is my favorite population. And I had 190 straight. And teach all day.
Not 100 yet.
100. And do what you have to do as a teacher and lesson plans. You're too old for it. Everybody's too old for it.
They get your grades and have to sub for us through the IU. So you're at 48? Yeah. And then you won't ever be talk to Barb, she's trying to figure out how to get it.
I want to go seriously. I don't know what I'm talking to. Right, I think she have fun. Just make flowers all day long. Don't work right. She used to be the director. Yes,
She subbed in for me a few times.
yeah, well, it's probably her favorite class. Yeah, I'm sure. Help with
She's just the life skills.
I definitely.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. My grandson.
Have a great rest of the night.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
A couple days ago.
Hey, Joe.
Josh called me and said, come get me. You know, I'm just right down on Jersey. And I said, well, sure. I said, where do you want to go? His friend lives here. And he said, hi, Josh. That was just beautiful. I could remember a couple years back, Josh was younger. Loyal son.
Bring this meeting back to order. This time, withdraw my motion for right now and give the public time to speak on this subject of 31.
Hi, my name is Kim Delt-McCloskey, and I'm from Upper Fairfield Township. I recently returned here after graduating high school in '81 here, and both my parents are graduates, and a lot further than that. I got moved back here when the whole election was going on. Military brat, very sentimental to the Stones. That was where my allegiance lied. Until I started investigating and trying to find out what was going on here and why this town was so divided. And it broke my heart that we're ending up here 2 years later still fighting like this. Mrs. Basin, never met you, it's nice to meet you. I want to thank you for going to the borough to find out information that I'm quite honestly very perplexed and dumbfounded that the group that ran on this premise to keep this stone building had no plan in place. I'm dumbfounded at that we're sitting here a year and a half later and a new person is coming in to find out what is available to us, what are our options. We should have had that figured out a long time ago. And for anyone, for you all on this board, for all of us back here, no one can make a decision if we don't know demo costs, if we don't know what it costs to keep it, if we don't know. Again, perplexed a year and a half later. Look at me as a woman like I don't know what it takes to do it. Not true. I came back here, bought my grandparents' family home, tore it down to the studs, rebuilt it, new electrical, plumbing, roofing, siding, everything. A hell of a lot more expensive than it was for me to start all over new. I get it. It was emotional. I could have afforded it. Taxpayers cannot afford to do that now. They can't. And we're sitting here bickering over it because you guys cannot figure out a budget. I don't know what to say except that I hope that you put your heads together and think about what's best for the future. Thank you.
Jack Callahan, 113 Arch Street in Toursville, and I knew Kim's grandfather real well. He was one of the best supporters of the Toursville athletics here that there ever was. He'd get into it every game and that. And I want to say I am for the 31 structure, and I wrote down some things that they could use it. They could have the nurse's office there, the resource officer there, a self-defense big class, or maybe a guidance officer, or some racquetball courts, or whatever. And I know over in South Williamsport, Bill Ruffin's school, that they had a old school over there, and they repaired that, I think, and that. And you know, and I think the same thing could be done here. And I think there's maybe other people have some other ideas, but I'm completely for the new structure. And you know, I mean, I can see everybody's point in that, you know, but I'm for it, and I think there can be some ideas that can be worked in there. I know there's a lot of rules and codes and everything else and that, but I think, you know, I think something else could be done. I don't know. You know, I mean, self-defense is big, and I think that, you know, room could be in there, and have the cop or resource officer, whatever he is, he'd be it'd be a private thing where everybody and their brother would know if some kid got in trouble. And the guidance officers were there, the same thing, if people wanted to come in and talk about their kid or the kid's future, it could be a good place there, and nurse or whatever else. And I think there could be, I always say we had a JC chapter back in 40 years, I was in it, and it was for people, men back then, 35 and below. And we took the School of Hope to the carnival, you know, something like similar to tonight. And I mean, we did other things. We had one of the best chapters. Usville had one, Muncie had one, Lock Haven had one, Williamsport had one. In the latter years, they left women in, and I'd just like to see, you know, it fell by the wayside. But I want to say history repeats itself. So I think in a lot of things, whether it's war or whatever, and you know, I think this could be a revolving door, and things could be used from past experience to, you know, do this, you know, do something about this, you know. But I don't know. I mean, I don't want to see 10 extra parking spaces out there. I don't know what the plans are for it when they, if you bulldoze it or whatever. But I think there could be some use to it and that. And I mean, you know, I know it deteriorated and everything like everything else, but I think it can be brought up and something in there that could be useful to everybody, you know. So that's about it. I mean, I don't, you know, I knock myself out trying to think of things that it could be used for, but I don't know. I mean, what do they use all these other old schools for? I mean, in the Commonwealth, you know, so.
Pamela Nelson, 225 Bennett Street. I don't understand, I believe it was Mrs. John said, why are we rushing? It's been a few years, this is not a new idea. I was just going through my emails, May 6th, 5th, and 6th of last year. I sent an email to the entire board. I also sent an email to the entire Borough Council asking if anybody can approach them, what the guidelines would be, you know, as far as having a vacant building sitting a block away from my house, or it can be a community center, all of that. I did get a response back from a few borough members saying nobody had bothered asking them that, so they didn't know what was going on. One of them did follow up with me in September and said, hey, just want to let you know I still haven't heard anything. As of right now, there's no fees because they haven't done anything. There will be fees incurred once they decide they're doing something. Nobody's had asked them at that point. Obviously, Mrs. Basin has. This is not a new idea. Going back to before the last school board election, it's probably September 2015 or whatnot, when they had gone with the plan, and then they said we've gone back to CRA, and if we want to keep the 31, it'd be about $3-4 million to keep it. That's the tail end of the project. If anybody in the community wants an idea, to bring us some ideas, we're willing to consider ideas. That's 3 years down the road. You've got time to come up with $3 million from the community or an idea. Bring us an idea. One specific person who is currently on this board stood right up and said, what do you mean you want us to come up with $3-4 million? Where are we going to get it? And I stood up and said, we're the taxpayers. If somebody doesn't raise it, then it has to come out of our taxes. It's coming out of our money anyway. They're just asking for an idea. So here we are in 2017. This is not rushing it. There's a building, Woodward School, I believe, on in Linden, has been sitting vacant for years.
Yep.
They have acres and acres of vacant land that they can be used for parking and development. Nobody has used it. Nobody's going to use this that does not have acres to use and develop on or put parking in when they're not using that. I see on the news all the time. A year ago, a school over in the Scranton area that had been vacant for 10 or more years that sold for, I think, $5,000 to be turned into a halfway house after it had been vacant for 10 plus years. This is not a new idea. You can find vacant buildings everywhere that are not getting used. And we're not rushing anything. The board changed a year and a half ago. I have yet to see anybody come to anybody with an idea. So to say, well, let's postpone it another year, it's been a year and a half, and I've yet to see one thought. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Michael Luna, I'm from 1020 Weldon Street. I just want to clarify something that there seems to be a misunderstanding on. The notion that you can leave this building and not spend any more money on it for 6 months or a year or 18 months. When the demolition clears through the north end wing, the old 51 ring, and reaches the 31 section, CRA is obligated to do some work with that. They've got to close the roof in and waterproof it. They've got to wrap it in stone to make it look like the south end. As we sit here today, CRA doesn't know whether or not that stone is there behind those walls, whether or not it was just a corridor cut through, or do they have to replicate that? Mr. Hagemeyer, you just spoke about how expensive it would be now to replicate that stonework. There's a huge unknown expenditure here, and that's something that I think you need to consider before you decide to spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars having them fulfill their contract obligations only to decide a year from now that you're going to tear it down. I just want to make sure you understand that you can't leave it and not spend anything. Now, CRA makes it clear that that money's already within the terms of the change order contract, and that's true, but you haven't paid it yet. Those invoices haven't come to you yet. Once the demolition reaches that point, and that'll happen in the next few weeks, as soon as they do that, they're going to have to weatherproof it for you to keep it from getting wet and rotting and to make sure it can structurally stand on its own. And then those invoices are going to start coming. And if they have to wrap that in with stonework because it's not there, as you just said yourself, sir, that's going to be quite expensive to replicate what you said they can no longer build like that anymore. So I think it's important to understand that we cannot leave it and not spend money on it. If by the time the demolition reaches that point, the decision to demo has not been made, then those invoices will start coming for the work that they have to do to fulfill their contract obligations. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name's Joe Shore, 340 North Washington Street. Thank you for allowing me to ask questions. My first question is about what happens to the permits that right now are an open book. And we're able to look at those permits that had already been approved and paid for and plans. And when the project is closed and you're done, you're saying, ta-da, and we're leaving, does that close that book on the opportunity to piggyback those things that are already in existence that you said possibly we could use? At what point does the window close? Is it a year? Is it when you walk out the door?
I don't know if I can define that for you, and you know, I have to ask you questions. Do you mean, is there a window that there's a cost, or do you, I mean, once you can determine to keep the 1931 structure there, okay? What Mr. Luna just said about demolishing the 51 up to a point and then closing off the end of that, that is what is in the contract right now, okay? Because we changed to that from originally taking it down. You could do all of that, and Mr. Luna's correct, you'd be spending some money on closing that end, of course. But that is not additional money in terms of what we have planned for now.
Okay.
But you could let it go and do this next year. You would have costs associated with that demolition. There's a partial basement and crawl space in there that would have to be filled in.
But right now, it was already included in all that plan cost?
Originally, not right now,
Okay.
but originally, the original contract would have had the material, some of the materials being retained, because originally we were going to do a ticket booth and
Right.
some things. And then anything else on site, because of our LEED Gold aspirations, they're better than that. I mean, we're in pretty good shape that way, but because of that, we're recycling pretty much everything on site. So that all of what would come down, because there's actually masonry behind the stone that you see, would have been gone through a grinder and would have been used right back on the site again, okay?
Okay. So if the board elects to go with taking down 31 as the original plan indicated, can those documents be, surfacing again without
can't promise that, but we would look at, minimizing anything that would happen with that.
And right now, because you're here, minimizing that cost is a possibility, but when you leave, it's just, if this discussion comes after you leave, it starts all over again at, let's
You're sort
start.
of ground zero at that point, yes.
Okay, so that was my one question, and thank you for
Does
allowing me to.
Does that answer it?
Well, it did, yeah, because I expected once you leave, it's like, okay, we pack up our plans, we pack up the, Plan Con extensions, we pack up everything and say, see ya, and then that, I expect that you would be packing up to leave well before a year from now. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so thank you. My next question is about PA code for education. You went through the school board or the borough codes, but what about the PA codes for education and what it takes to manage a facility that, as a school district, of a property, because we would still be managing it. What would it take as far as those PA codes for education? Are there any restrictions there?
I believe that the Pennsylvania Department of Education follows the international uniform building codes. They would have to.
Well, outside the building codes, management codes, are there any management code restrictions within the PA education code?
In looking through the Pennsylvania school code, it only speaks to buildings that you own and buildings that you wish to give away. It's in the 700s, I think it's 703, section
Okay.
703. I was looking for that as well, to understand what you're saying as a management, what do we do with this and how do we
Right.
occupy this?
And what are restrictions or expectations or to revisit? I stood before the board, a couple times, and I also asked about if utilities would be separated during the course of this waiting procedure, and you said that, separate utility boxes, that it would just be a continuation of what is here, like it would be piggyback from what's already here, is that correct?
Mostly that's right. Maybe some of those questions I can't really answer for you yet, because we're just getting into what they always used to call E-wing, or, coming down through there. We're just getting back into that. So we're now discovering where some of these lines go. I would say generally what you said is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
No,
from what
no
we've seen
separate
so far.
utility boxes to acknowledge how much this costs, it's just being absorbed out of our operating cost here.
Generally, that's right up to now.
Okay. Another question, what does it cost to insure a vacant building on a school property while it is not in use? And does that extend the cost of the insurance cost?
We would have to have a liability insurance policy on that building, so yes, you would be incurring liability costs.
And would the liability cost be increased because it's not up to code?
I don't know if it would be increased because it's not up to code. I think it would be increased because it's not being utilized.
Or maintained?
Right.
So that,
A liability policy is very different than the actual property insurance that you would have on a building that would be utilized.
okay. So my question then is, what is our window for decision-making?
Well, my answer is I can't quite answer that yet.
But my point is, I think my point is, through these questions, and these were serious questions that weren't being pulled into the discussion, and I think, I was curious about. But, through it, you just can't pick an arbitrary date, because there will be a point of saying, it's too late to hang on.
There's going to be a point of optimal timing, okay?
Okay.
And then beyond that, there's probably an incremental cost
Okay.
that'll be after that. I just don't know exactly what to tell you about that yet.
Okay, and I just want to close, Ms. Wright, when you came on the board, the question was asked of you, would you make a decision to tear down 31? And you said, You know, if I see that it becomes an albatross to the district, you know, I would vote that way. My question is, how do you define an albatross to a district? Thank you.
I'm sorry,
Excuse me.
if no, I was waiting, I didn't see anybody else
If
approach.
nobody
but-
else wants to talk, then
And that's fine, I
give
was
them a
trying to wait, I
chance
just
first.
I didn't want you to close it, and I didn't see anybody else approach. I want to piggyback on her question on the insurance. My other question would be, what, would the liability, even on the rest of our building, our premiums go down once what's presumably a higher fire risk and liability risk is not attached to it? And or if we're like cutting off water and things like that. So if the 31 were not attached, would that bring our insurance premiums down on everything else because that's no longer as much of an increased risk? And also, I did forget to mention earlier, and even at last meeting, I said I would like to see a work session for this. I would prefer that you maybe I don't necessarily need to see, let's vote tonight on, we're gonna do this, or we're not gonna do this, we're gonna put it off a year. I just wanna see the discussion. I'm not saying rush to decide tonight and make a decision you're not prepared to make. I just wanna see the discussion. And you know, but if the school's gonna be done in August, then yeah, we can't necessarily wait until 2018 to talk about it again. So don't rush if you're not informed, is what I ask. But I want you to become informed and talk and discuss. Thank you.
Kimberly Wren, 1105 Nicely Avenue. I don't think that making a decision tonight is rushing. I feel like you've all had ample time to look at this. I'm a huge fan of pro and con lists, and just in listening to what was talked about what we have to do and look at to keep it, and what we have to do to demo it, here's my keep list, here's my demo list. There's like 2 things over here and a whole bunch over here. Mr. Ruffing said it's a no-brainer, and I feel it. I mean, I feel you guys. You have worked so hard. You went through this election, you got on the board. I believe you're trying to make good decisions. I really do. And I was not on your side in the beginning. But I want you all to do good work. I see you wanting to do good works. And I'm asking you to do good works here and end this battle that we've all been having. Can somebody move into this if we close that wall? Nobody can move into this with just closing the wall and leaving it sit there. Even if you found a daycare or whatever it is you want, you still have to make the building functional, and it's not. It's a beautiful facade with a building behind it that sucks. I grew up outside Philadelphia. I understand the beauty of a stone home. I got to see them all the time where I lived. It reminds me of home. It does, it's a beautiful building, but it doesn't function anymore. It doesn't function for us, it doesn't function for this town. Somebody said about 10 more parking spaces. Our craft fair this year got crushed because of construction and because of no parking. This district can't host events on the lack of parking that we have. We're gonna miss so many opportunities to bring things here to our town without ample parking, including into that building. If you save that building and put something there, one of the issues brought up was, would additional parking be necessary for anything that would go in there? I mean, we need this. We need this to end. Please make a decision.
Carrie Starren from Montoursville. Mrs. Basin gave us some really interesting opportunities for various uses for that building. The one that stuck out most to me was the use of a $60 million grant from the state. What better use for that money could it be for our building? We have a phenomenal music program. We have a phenomenal theater department. What better use than to use that money as, if we could get it in the grant, write a grant for it, and use it as a career path for our students to see what it's like to work in the music industry, what it's like to work in the film industry. Why does everything have to go to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia? Why not Montoursville? Why not Lycoming County? I mean, we could be the center of something really special and really unique. So it might be worth looking into to see what the possibilities are. All they can do is say no, but that money is sitting there and someone's gonna get it. Why not Montoursville? Why not this area? Thank you.
Oh, she could have.
My name is Rachel Ulmer, and I live in Fairfield Township, and I just want to respond. $60 million is a phenomenal amount of money, but do you know the amount of money and time and labor and research it takes to write a grant? It's never guaranteed. I do it on a daily basis and probably get 1% of the grants that I write for. I just want everyone to realize that. That is my job, and there's no guarantee. So to put this on hold for a year and hope we get a grant, it's a waste of our time. 1% of the grants I write for, I get. And I run a nonprofit. This is what I do. So please take that into consideration. Hoping to get a grant is not even reasonable. I'm sorry.
May I speak now? As long as no one else. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
First of all, I just need some clarification to make sure I'm understanding this whole project and what's going on. And from what I understood from you, Mrs. Basin, is that enrollment is not going up, and that the 31 buildings serves no educational purpose, and the cost of renovating it to provide educational opportunities is pretty much non-existent. So then that makes the 31 building, if I'm correct, just a burden to the taxpayers, an additional cost, unless we find somebody who wants to either buy the building or use it for something else, correct?
They can't buy it. They can't buy it. It's our
Okay.
property.
So it's our albatross, if we want to do that. So, one of the things that bothers me when I watch or attend board meetings is that students in education are very rarely brought up. Again, tonight was fantastic to see both the arts program and our special population represented, and I know that the teachers are fantastic and do everything they can to have good quality education here in Toursville. And I'm always an advocate for education, whether it be arts, academia, technical, hands-on, whatever. I'm pro-education for whatever, because I think education should fit the needs of all of our students. I think that's our most important priority here, within fiscal reason, to keep costs down for our taxpayers. So with that being said, we have no purpose for the 31 building. It will not benefit students or education. The fact that the stones are old and you can't replicate a building like that anymore, that has nothing to do though with education and what your responsibilities are as a board. So my question, Mr. Hegermeyer, why do you think we need to keep the 31 building?
Because I think we can find use for it.
Educationally?
Anything.
What research have you done?
Well, I just, it should benefit our students.
Yes.
And in 2 years' time, nobody has shown interest in wanting to do anything with it. 2 years. So I just need to know where heads are coming from, because sometimes I can be in the wrong side, have trouble seeing out of it. And I just want to know why you think it needs to be kept for our district and our community. What purpose is it going to serve?
Because for me, it represents Montoursville, period.
Does that represent education?
And our kids.
That's what.
It can be used for education, maybe not as a building, but maybe as another asset to help the children out. until we do research on what we can actually use it for.
Can I ask you why that hasn't been done yet?
I personally don't have the information to even know where to
So the
start.
board hasn't even really started to look into other
I
possibilities?
can't answer for everybody else.
Mr. Ruffing, Mrs. Marriott, has the board started looking
No,
into other opportunities?
Mrs. Snyder, I had mentioned earlier that I was somewhat shocked that our superintendent last Friday was out at the borough office with zoning to
And I
see.
did hear.
I was shocked with a capital
Okay,
S.
all right.
So, no, there's really, I'm a believer that if we were going to find a use for it, it would have been found by now.
Mrs. Johns, I'd like to pose the same question to you. Why do you, what, besides, I need to know educational and taxpayer, why do you think the building should be maintained for at least another year?
Well, I think that once it's torn down, it's gone. Then the option to do anything with it is gone. And I don't understand what the big rush is. I have spoken to some people about it. I talked to a gentleman that does grant writing. I just want some time. I mean, the students were in the building and, you know.
So my next question is, why haven't you looked into it sooner?
Well, I have. I've gone to planning. I've done some.
Because we haven't heard any conversation about that at any of the
Well, because I
meetings.
don't have enough to share yet with the public, but I've gone to planning, I've talked to, someone in a nonprofit that has offered to help me, with grant writing.
And
I
it
would
is
like-
a student-based and education-based and fiscally responsible, you believe?
I don't know that yet. It's still preliminary, I would like more time. I don't understand why everyone's in such a big rush to tear this building down.
I think it's because we want the money to go towards the students. Mrs. Wright, what's your reason for wanting to keep it open?
Okay, first of all, I already said I will not put any more money into the building. Secondly, I would, and if I may, I would like to make a motion that we find all the costs to demolish it, until the next meeting. That's all I'm asking.
Again,
I'm
out.
with Ms. Nelson. I don't want to vote tonight when I don't know how much it's going to cost to tear down.
Okay, so we can sort of recommend you for like not having done it over the past 2 years, right?
No,
The board
no,
might
no.
have made a mistake in that, and I'm not yelling and being disrespectful, but perhaps that's
Not
something.
attacking board members.
Yeah, I'm not attacking a board member. I just think that that's something that you should have been doing for the past 2 years, or after you already looked at the fact that 31 wasn't feasible for our students and voted to continue with the high school project. That's probably when you should have been doing it, but you know what, I make mistakes too. What I find especially disappointing though is I asked a question and I did not hear once an answer involving education of our students or fiscal responsibility. And that's what worries me the most. It's not what our kids need, and it's not what we as tax, we don't need that albatross hanging over our head. We don't need it as taxpayers. We pay enough taxes and we know it's gonna go up and that's a responsibility. And as that educator retired, I don't mind paying for education. I think it's our responsibility. It's up there with, taxes, death, dying. We should be responsible for educating our kids. That's something I will pay well into retirement, and I'm okay with that. Keeping the building we can't use, that doesn't make sense to me, and you guys haven't been able to answer why it would make sense. So, I'm not for keeping 31, but that's it. Thank you.
Wait, I'm not wanting to talk.
There's a motion on the floor.
Nobody seconded it, I don't believe.
No, but I just want to clarify what the motion was.
But I thought people were allowed to talk.
Mr. Bagwell, would you please hold on?
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate it. What was your motion, Karen?
I wanted to make a motion that we wait until the next meeting. Between now and then, I want more information on the cost of the demolition. They're not going to get there before May 8th, right? Or am I wrong? Are they going to get there before?
I mean, I don't know, I would say probably not.
Okay, I would just ask, make a motion that we wait till the next meeting and then decide. And between now and then, I would like to get the demolition costs and that's winterization costs, that's my motion. I would like to make a motion to wait until May 8th meeting to decide on the demolition.
Karen, could I have you hold off on making that motion until the public gets done speaking?
So,
Thank you, Ron. Good job.
To me, what you have to look at is the logical conclusion of all this. If you start this project, why would you start it if you're not going to finish it? You're looking at putting probably $5 million into that building. Now, that's like about, what, a fifth or a sixth of what the original project was? You're talking about huge tax increases to the public to pay for that building. No, Mrs. Jones, you can shake your head at me, that's fine, but nobody's gonna come and rent that building for a couple $100,000 a year. Nobody, it's not gonna happen. It's completely unrealistic. So you're talking about huge tax increases to the public to pay for it. And even if you weren't, if you're putting money into that, you are not putting money to where it should go, to the students. That's why you're here, for the students. Every dollar that goes in there does not go to the valley, it does not go somewhere it should go. Now, if you take and ask in this room how many people want their taxes raised, how many people are going to raise their hands? If you ask people, how many people would like money diverted from the students to that stone, not too many people are going to raise their hands. Between the two groups, there's nobody going to raise their hands. And that's what's happening here. You don't start a project unless you're going to finish it. You're wasting money initially because there's no logical conclusion to this. Because nobody's going to spend $60 million. You're not going to get $60 million to do a film studio in this county. I take pictures here. I take a lot of pictures. There's not $60 million worth of pictures to take here. Thank you.
I'm Wayne Miller, 717 Broad Street. My house was built in 1832. That was 52 years after George Washington freed our country. My house is still standing. It's not the best house in town, but it's still standing. This piece you want to rip down out here wasn't built for another 100 years after my house was built. My house is still sturdy, still functional. 31 can still be used as a functional thing if you find a reason to use it for. The house that I live in was built as a church. 1832, served two denominations for 20, 25 years. When it was no longer used as a church, they turned it into part of the high school in Toursville. So it was one of the original high schools. Thank God the school board at that time didn't decide to rip it down because they didn't need it anymore. Another thing that I came across through my business and stuff, I came across the deeds to the, I think it's the old red brick building that sits over on Jordan Avenue that became a high school in 1835. The town of Toursville voted to build that school. The people in the town voted to build that school. This school board was put on here because the people before didn't allow the people to speak their minds. You got an election coming up, May 12th. Why can't you put it on the ballot and let the people of the school district decide whether they want to rip it down or say, why should you guys suffer? Let the town do their own bidding. The school board, the old school board should have put it on the ballot for us to build a $36 million Taj Mahal. It wasn't done, it was sneakily done. And you have an opportunity right now because it's coming up. You can put it on the ballot and let the town and the school district decide whether or not to rip it down. Is that a feasible thing to do? They did it in the past. I have the election results from 1835. Nobody knows?
I actually would think that you'd be able to put it on a referendum, but I don't know if it's too late to get it on May 16th.
You got one coming up pretty soon. I would try to get it on there. Take the pressure off you guys whether they rip it down or not. I can't believe, I asked Dick a little while ago what it would cost to rip that down. They have no idea. I can't believe that we built a school and started 4 years ago, and we don't have an idea what it would cost to rip that section down out there. I don't, for whatever reason, somebody ought to have a figure on that to say, it's gonna cost us $800,000 to rip it down, it's gonna cost us $60,000 to rip it down. I just can't fathom that, but you need that figure before you can go forward, like you were saying, with anything, with any kind of a decision. You have to have those costs under your belt to know what you're talking about. So that's all I gotta say. Think about it. Thank you.
There's been a few changes since 1835, just for the record.
Not
My
my
name's
house.
Chris Sherwood in Montoursville. There's also been quite a number more people goes Chris Sherwood, Montoursville, sorry.
I don't think
That's
he
fine.
interrupted anybody
You
else.
can't just throw something on a ballot. You have to petition this Chris, I said 3 times, Chris Sherwood, Montoursville. You have to petition the state, that takes time. 16 months you've had this. This was your campaign that you ran on, Keep 31. You said that it's Montoursville to you, correct? But you haven't bothered in 16 months to figure out what to do with it. You admitted you didn't do any research, right?
I don't have time for it.
But you're on the school board, this is your building, this is your
Please
job.
speak to the whole board.
Well, I'm asking Mr. Hagermeyer,
No,
he's the
the
one that's.
board as a
Okay,
whole.
fine, 16 months, none of you have done any research on what to do with 31 building. None, you have no idea. And none of it has to do with education, nothing. That just blows my mind, I just couldn't imagine doing that for 16 months. And I can't help, Karen, but to feel that you wanna put it off because the primaries are coming up. I mean, I have to thank, they're coming up. You know, the old board, they made a decision that was tough, but if it wasn't for Tom McNamara, Dale Armour, Bill Ruffing, I can't help but say, I know they made a vote that half the town hated the other town, but they did it for the benefit of the students. If they wouldn't have done that, the 31 section would still be in the shape that it is. Where would our kids have gone to school? If they wouldn't have built this part, what would you have moved the students into? I can't help but ask that. What would you have moved them into when you found out that it had that much structural damage if the previous board wouldn't have gone forward with the vote?
If you're directing the question to me.
No, it's not a question, it's just a statement. I just get the feeling that you just want to put it off and put it off to the next person, you're not even coming back after the primaries, correct? You're not running on the next one. So for you, you don't want to deal with it, and I get that. You don't want to make the tough decision, like the previous board had to make against, popular vote. I get that, but at least admit it. Thanks.
May I clarify one thing? I am on the board until December, so I will have to deal with it.
I was here earlier, for the record, Scott Metzger, and I wasn't gonna say anything until I heard a comment about Montoursville is the Stones. And I totally, that is just, to me, an ignorant statement. Montoursville is the people of this town.
Amen.
I grew up in Williamsburg. My dad built a third of Montoursville. I came here for one of 2 reasons: to raise my family, and because of the crime rate. When people move into a community, they look at 2 things. They look at the educational system, and they look at the crime rate. I moved here in '88, right out of college. There was a beautiful plan to go out 87 with free land for half the cost. There was people in this town that blocked that. And now we're receiving the repercussions of it because of a few people. History has a way of repeating itself. So now we're back to square one, which would have been paid by now. It was on gas land, so you would have had an income. It was being given to you for free. And now we've got a new high school we're going to be paying for years to come. I spoke to you last week about the real problem is pension reform. You need to tackle that, not a building sitting empty. Mr. Luna is exactly right.
And we both put second additions on our homes. We live a block and a half away from each other. When a contractor shows up and opens up a building, and you're open to the sky, or you're open to exposure from elements, you need to close that. That's gonna happen in 2 weeks. If not, 3 weeks. That's gonna cost $100,000. I can tell you that right now, Karen. It's gonna cost $100 grand. I own property throughout Matoursville. Just to put a roof on a property right now is $25,000. That's a roof, not to close the whole end that runs a block. You need to do that. And you don't know what's behind those walls. So you're gonna find hidden costs. You need to make a decision. You've had 16 months. You ran on transparency and you ran on a plan. The plan isn't there. I asked you last month, what was the plan with the building? You're there because you make tough decisions, not to keep kicking the can down the road like the board did back in 1998. They kicked that can and we're all paying for it. And we're going to continue to pay for it. Make a decision and do it now. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Marie Ulmer. I'm a senior here from Matoursville. I never decided to talk until a bunch of comments, but I think a lot of people can agree that I talk to a lot of people about a lot of things, so I can properly project a collective opinion of all the students here. And I can tell you that no one is talking about the old building. They're talking about how we can't have microwaves or we can't have coffee. And I know that sounds like a luxury, but it's something we are used to. And that's something most of the new schools and colleges have, which is what we need to adapt to. So the money that would be pushed towards the 31 building is not money that's going towards us. And that's money that we need. Also, someone said about 10 parking spots. Well, those 10 people, those could be 10 of my friends. Right now, they're all parking on Jordan Ave. And since the old building is closed off, we can't enter it, they're parking on Jordan Ave, walking, I think, 4 blocks, all the way around to the new building, which is ridiculous. That takes about 7 minutes. So they had to completely adjust their schedule to get here earlier, just because there's no parking. And I know many of them have gotten parking tickets because of that, because they just can't find anything. Also, I used to, when the old building was open, I had a study hall on that side, and I would literally run to that building and run out just because of how horrid it was. There was nothing I could do in there. The Wi-Fi barely worked. It was freezing, or it was really hot. There was overcrowding because half the rooms had too little of desks. It just doesn't make sense to keep it. And that's about it, all I have to say. But I just feel like, as a student, our voice gets lost, and I need to tell you guys that it doesn't matter what we say, and our opinion is one of the main factors that should be considered. Thank you.
John Klotz from Eldred Township. I may have missed this earlier, and Dick, you may be able to speak to this, but what is the cost of weatherizing the end of the 31 building that must be completed and is under contract under the current change orders? Do we have a number on that?
Right now, the cost of that, I have to give you a range, so it's between $10,000 and $15,000 is included for that.
Okay. So when we talk about doing nothing with the 31 structure, we're not talking about doing nothing. We're talking about at least another $10,000 to $15,000 before we shut the heat off and let the building continue to rot and fall apart. It's mind-boggling to me that I've been to the meeting 2 weeks ago and then to this meeting. In the meeting 2 weeks ago, we talked about a budget shortfall of $500,000. And then going forward another year, over $1 million. Yet we're talking about spending money on a building that has no educational value. Mrs. Johns, you asked what the hurry is, what the rush is. The rush is that my children are in this school system. And my children's education suffers every day that this district is inefficient. And it may not sound like a big number, but $10,000 or $15,000 every 2 weeks, because every time we turn around, there's something else. Another $30,000 for pipes to a building we don't have an educational use for. That all is inefficient. As a board, you cannot afford to be inefficient in the position you are in. That position demands that you act decisively, you act quickly, and you make difficult decisions. My mother's 82 years old. She graduated out of the 1931 structure.